When an avoidant looks at you, they don't just see who you are now, they see exactly who they could become if they were brave enough to let you love them completely. You represent their potential for emotional growth, healing, and transformation into someone they've always wanted to be but never believed was possible. The terrifying part isn't that they can't see their future with you, it's that they can see it so clearly it takes their breath away, and that vision feels too good to be real. They see their healed self reflected in your eyes. When you look at them with love and acceptance, they catch glimpses of a version of themselves that's emotionally available, vulnerable, and capable of genuine intimacy. In your eyes, they see someone worthy of unconditional love, someone who could learn to receive care without suspicion, and someone who could offer their heart without fear of annihilation. This vision of their healed self is simultaneously inspiring and terrifying because it requires them to believe they're capable of fundamental change. You don't just love who they are now, you love their potential, and you believe in their capacity to grow beyond their current limitations. This faith in their transformation feels like pressure they're not sure they can live up to. The reflection you provide shows them someone who could learn to trust, to be vulnerable, and to love without reservation. But becoming that person would require dismantling every defense mechanism they've spent years perfecting, and that level of psychological reconstruction feels overwhelming and dangerous. They envision a life of emotional intimacy they've never experienced. Through your love, they can imagine what it would feel like to share their deepest thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment or rejection. They see a future where emotional intimacy feels safe rather than terrifying, where vulnerability creates connection rather than exploitation, and where being fully known leads to being fully loved. This vision of emotional intimacy is intoxicating because it represents everything they've secretly wanted but never believed they could have. They can imagine morning conversations about feelings, shared emotional experiences that bring them closer together, and the profound connection that comes from truly understanding another human being. But this future also terrifies them because it would require sustained emotional availability that they've never been able to maintain. They're afraid that their natural tendency toward emotional withdrawal would eventually destroy this beautiful intimacy you're offering, turning their dream into another source of regret and self-hatred. They see themselves learning to trust completely. With you, they can imagine what it would feel like to trust someone completely with their heart, their vulnerabilities, and their deepest fears. They see a future where they don't have to constantly guard against betrayal, abandonment, or emotional manipulation because they've found someone genuinely safe and trustworthy. This vision of complete trust feels like psychological freedom they've never experienced. They imagine not having to analyze every interaction for hidden meanings, not having to maintain emotional escape routes, and not having to protect themselves from someone they love. The idea of trusting you completely feels like coming home to themselves. The terrifying part is that complete trust requires them to give up control over their emotional safety. Trusting you fully means accepting that you have the power to hurt them more deeply than anyone ever has, and their psychology isn't sure they can survive that level of vulnerability. They imagine becoming someone their childhood self would be proud of. Through your love and acceptance, they can see themselves healing the wounds that created their avoidant patterns in the first place. They envision becoming the person their wounded inner child always hoped they could be, someone capable of giving and receiving love without fear, someone emotionally brave and open-hearted. This vision of emotional courage and authenticity represents everything they've always wanted to become, but never believed was possible. You make them feel like they could overcome their childhood programming and become someone genuinely capable of healthy love and intimate connection. The image of their transformed self is beautiful but overwhelming because it would require them to face and heal traumas they've spent their entire adult life avoiding. Becoming worthy of your love means doing the emotional work they've been running from, and that prospect feels both necessary and impossible. They see a partnership where they could actually be vulnerable. With you, they can imagine sharing their deepest insecurities, their childhood wounds, and their most shameful secrets without being met with judgment or rejection. They see a future where vulnerability creates intimacy rather than ammunition, where openness leads to deeper connection rather than exploitation. This vision of safe vulnerability is revolutionary for someone who's learned that sharing their authentic self leads to pain and abandonment. You represent the possibility that emotional openness could actually make them safer rather than more vulnerable to being hurt. But the idea of sustained vulnerability feels impossible to maintain because they've never learned healthy emotional regulation skills. They're afraid that opening up completely would lead to emotional overwhelm that would force them to retreat back into isolation, disappointing you and confirming their fears about their incapacity for genuine intimacy. They envision breaking generational patterns of emotional dysfunction. Through your love, they see themselves becoming the person who stops the cycle of emotional unavailability, trauma, and disconnection that's been passed down through their family line. They imagine learning to love in ways their parents never could, creating the secure attachment they never experienced in childhood. This vision of breaking generational patterns feels profoundly meaningful because it would transform their trauma into purpose. Instead of perpetuating the emotional dysfunction they inherited, they could learn to love healthily and create different patterns for any future family they might have. The weight of this responsibility feels overwhelming because it's not just about their personal healing. It's about stopping cycles of pain that have affected their entire family system. The pressure to succeed in healing themselves feels enormous when the stakes include breaking patterns that have existed for generations. They see themselves deserving and receiving unconditional love. Perhaps most terrifyingly, they can see themselves actually accepting and believing they deserve the unconditional love you're offering. They imagine a future where they don't constantly question your motives, don't wait for the other shoe to drop, and don't sabotage the relationship because it feels too good to be true. This vision of self-acceptance and worthiness represents the deepest healing they could possibly experience. Through your love, they see themselves learning to believe they're inherently valuable and deserving of care, not because of what they accomplish or how they perform, but simply because they exist. The terrifying part is that accepting they deserve love would require dismantling their entire identity as someone who's fundamentally flawed and unworthy. Their sense of self has been built around being damaged goods, and learning to see themselves as worthy of love would require a complete psychological reconstruction. They understand the commitment required for this future. What makes them stay away isn't that they can't see this beautiful future with you. It's that they can see it so clearly and understand exactly what it would require from them. They know that becoming the person worthy of your love would demand sustained effort, consistent vulnerability, and the willingness to face their deepest fears and wounds. They're not afraid of you. They're afraid of the person they'd have to become to be worthy of you. They can see their potential for growth and healing reflected in your love, but they're not sure they have the courage to do the work required to transform their potential into reality. They stay away because seeing their future with you makes them realize how much they'd have to change to deserve that future, and that level of transformation feels both essential and impossible.